If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you're enjoying these stories, there's a link below to buy me a cup of coffee. This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HasidicStory.com. HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. Shalom Aleichem, my sweetest friends. Purim in Jerusalem, I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but here was really something. I was probably at Adelo Yoda, not knowing the difference between Mordechai and Haman, already on Rosh Chodesh Adar, but for sure on Friday night, Kabbalat Shabbat. It was as if we were in another world. If you ever get a chance, my sweetest friends, to come Friday night to the Mayanot Shul in Jerusalem, I lead the davening there. I've been leading the davening there for probably 25 years or more. Please make sure you say hi to me. There have been many listeners that have, and I'd love to meet you. So I have 3 stories for you this week, Be'ezrat Hashem. But before I begin, this week's episode has been dedicated in memory of Ruth Bat Hillel for her 22nd yahrzeit by Andrew and Simone Grant, and her grandchildren and future grandchildren, Be'ezrat Hashem. Her neshama should have an aliyah in Gan Eden and look down at her grandchildren and have Chassidic nachas, Be'ezrat Hashem, knowing that they listen to these stories and live these stories, God willing. And if you'd like to dedicate an episode, my friends, you can do so by going to my website, and you'll find a link there. If not, send me an email and I'll help you out. And of course, this podcast is dedicated to our soldiers in battle. May Hashem keep them safe and successful wherever they are. The returning of all of the hostages, healthy and alive, God willing. The refuah shlema, the full recovery of everybody who's been injured or who is ill. The comforting of those that lost loved ones. And the continued unity of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel and all around the world, God willing. The first story is quite a long story. It's about Rabbi Chaim Tzvi Manheimer, who lived from 1814 to 1876. He's the author of Ein B'Deloach, a legal commentary which explains complex matters of halacha with remarkable clarity. And by the end of the story, of course, you'll understand why. When he was just 9 years old, Chaim Tzvi was considered a great scholar, and he attended the yeshiva of Rabbi Kappel Charif, Rabbi Yaakov Koppel, who lived from 1787 to 1853. And why was he called the Charif? It means sharp or spicy in modern Hebrew. It reflected his analytical approach to learning and teaching halacha. In Rabbi Koppel, he served as the rabbi in several Hungarian communities and eventually became the chief rabbi in the town of Verbo. During the first year of study in Rabbi Kappel Charif's yeshiva, young Chaim Tzvi was amongst all of the people in the Beit Midrash that were listening to the teacher's Shabbat HaGadol sermon. And everybody knows that Shabbat HaGadol is the Shabbos before Pesach, which is of course coming up in a month. And this special Shabbos was traditionally when rabbis would give over their most significant discourses on Jewish law and thought. And during the sermon, Rabbi Koppel presented 12 profound questions related to the topic that they were discussing and gave 12 answers to his own questions, showcasing his sharpness in his brilliant mind. And of course, all the students that were listening were left astonished, in awe at the genius of their rabbi. And after the talk, they all went back to review the teachings, all that is except for young Chaim Tzvi. Later on, he approached his teacher and asked him if he could walk home with him to discuss the sermon. And the teacher said, "Of course, you're welcome to come with me." Now remember, back then Chaim Tzvi was only 9 years old. And with incredible respect for Rabbi Charif, Chaim Tzvi, in a soft, clear, and fluent voice, told the rabbi that everything he said was actually wrong and he had misunderstood it. And eventually, when the rabbi realized that Chaim Tzvi was right, he was so overjoyed, he bent down and kissed the boy's forehead. And later, he even publicly told everyone that Chaim Tzvi had refuted all of the rabbi's questions and answers and was right about every single one of them. And the rabbi joked that it's true, Chaim Tzvi, your words are true and just, but I wonder, how could we find a child who's permitted to eat on Yom Kippur that would have the brilliance and courage to refute the rabbi's sermon? Because, of course, you know, the children under the age of bar mitzvah are exempt from fasting, and this boy was only 9 years old, so he became nicknamed the one who eats on Yom Kippur, which reflected both his youth and his brilliance. Before long, Chaim Tzvi was recognized as one of the top students in the renowned yeshiva of Rabbi Binyamin Zev, who was a great scholar in the town of Kolin in Bohemia and was the author of many important works on Jewish law and ethics. Even before reaching the age of 13, Chaim Tzvi was accepted to the famed Pressburg Yeshiva and became one of the top students of Rabbi Moshe Sofer, known as the Chassam Sofer, who lived from 1762 to 1839. The Chassam Sofer was the foremost Torah authority of his generation in Europe, and he was also, because of the circumstances in his times, a fierce defender of halachic Judaism against the rising Reform movement. And his answers and commentaries shaped Jewish law and thought for generations to come. To study under such a great Torah giant was the greatest honor in the Jewish world. And for the Chassam Sofer to recognize somebody as a Torah genius carried weight in the entire Jewish world. So in addition to his genius and his Torah greatness, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi was also very practical, and he was known to be righteous and fair. And during his years as a rabbi and leader, people came from all over the Jewish world in order to receive blessings, advice, and wisdom from the rabbi. And his advice was trusted by all sections of society, not just the Jewish community. The common people and even the non-Jewish leaders would seek advice from Reb Chaim Tzvi. Even the secular courts would sometimes refer to him in difficult and complex cases. And there was one such case that involved a Jewish villager from the region that Reb Chaim Tzvi lived. He left town to purchase a dairy cow, and on his way he runs into a Gentile who he was friendly with and who happened to have a dairy cow that was for sale. The two of them started negotiating, they reached an agreement, and the Jew paid the non-Jew for the cow. As the non-Jew was about to leave, the Jew said to him, "Since I still need to buy a few more things in town, would you please do me a favor and take the cow on your way home and deliver it to my house, which is in the village nearby?" And the Gentile says, "Sure, why not?" He made a nice profit. The Jew paid him already. So he took the cow and he went on his way. And later that evening, after buying everything he needed in town, the Jew returned home in a very excited and cheerful mood. And he comes home and he says to his wife, "Well, what do you think of the cow that I bought today?" And his wife says, "What cow? I haven't heard or seen a cow." And the guy said, "What do you mean? Didn't the Gentile neighbor deliver the cow to our house?" And the wife said, "No, nobody came here with the cow at all." So the Jew immediately ran to the Gentile neighbor's house and he said, "Where's my cow?" And the Gentile said, "I don't know what you're talking about." "What cow?" He said, "The cow that I bought from you today. I gave you all my money. I bought the cow from you." I said, "Sorry, friend, don't know what you're talking about. Not only do I not know what you're talking about, I haven't even seen you all day." And realizing that he'd been deceived, the Jew slammed the door and ran to the city police station to complain about the stolen cow. The police officers listened, and they decided to investigate. However, when the police showed up, the Gentile denied having any business connection with the Jew whatsoever. And the police, realizing that the Jew wasn't lying, he was telling the truth, but he didn't have proof, he decided to refer the case to the city judge. But even the judge, after trying to get the seller to agree that he had received money from this Jew, he couldn't get him to agree. And not knowing what to do, the judge whispered to the Jew that he should visit Rabbi Manheimer, who was the rabbi of the Jewish community at the time, and ask him how to get a confession from the cow seller who was lying to everyone. And what happened next, my friends, shows the wisdom of Rabbi Manheimer. The Jew went to the rabbi, presented the case, and even before hearing the complete story, he already told the Jew what to do. He said, "Go and tell the judge, in my name, to request that the police chief send a squad of officers to the Gentile's home to search for counterfeit coins." And the Jew said, "Rabbi, with all due respect, what does counterfeit coins have to do with my stolen cow?" But the rabbi said, "Don't delay. Just do what I said. And Be'ezrat Hashem, everything's going to work out." So the judge, who of course trusted the rabbi, he was also curious to see how counterfeit money was going to help with the stolen cow. And so he told the police chief to go with the squad of policemen. And when they arrived at the Gentile's home and informed him of their intent to search the house for counterfeit coins, the Gentile started screaming, I swear, The only money that you'll find in this house is the money that I got from the Jew who bought the cow from me yesterday. I don't have any counterfeit coins. If I do, they came from the Jew, not from me. I'm innocent." And of course, that admission was enough for the police to find the cow and return it to the Jewish buyer. And you know what's so amazing? That just as Rabbi Manheimer, with his divine wisdom, helped that Jewish victim from the Gentiles stole from him, he didn't hesitate to save a Gentile from a Jew when the situation was reversed. And there was an incident just like that. There was a Gentile basket seller in the rabbi's town. And after selling his entire stock of baskets, the Gentile ended his day at the tavern of a Jewish innkeeper. And since the Gentile was an alcoholic, he stayed in the tavern, drinking glass after glass. And the hours passed, and at some point the Gentile was unable to get up and leave. And when he did, he simply fell over on the floor and fell asleep. So before locking up, the innkeeper dragged the Gentile outside so he could sleep outside. And when the Gentile woke up in the morning outside of the tavern, he reached into his pocket for the money, but it was missing. And realizing that there was nobody in the middle of the night who would know he had money in his pocket, it must have been the innkeeper who had dragged him outside. So he ran to the innkeeper and he said, "Give me my money back." And the innkeeper said, "I never saw any money. I didn't see your pouch. I didn't touch anything." So the Gentile, having no choice, he went to the police. And the police, they investigated, but they couldn't find any money or any pouch. And eventually, the case reached the judge who, like the police, also made no progress because the innkeeper didn't know what anyone was talking about. And then the judge told the Gentile, "Go to Rabbi Manheimer and see if he can help." Now, the Gentile had no love for Jews and didn't really want to go to the rabbi, but he had no choice, and so he did. And the rabbi immediately summoned the innkeeper to appear before him for a din Torah, a Jewish court hearing. And of course, nobody in the Jewish community could deny something like that. If somebody as great as Rabbi Chaim Tzvi called you, you came or you would be excommunicated by the community. So the innkeeper showed up, but he had rehearsed his denial and he was an excellent actor. And at some point, the rabbi, pretending like he wasn't going to make any progress, he turned to the Gentile and he said, "I understand, my friend, that in the light of the innkeeper's firm denial, and since there's no evidence, I can't obligate him to pay you back." And the Gentile was so upset, but he knew he'd gone to the police, he went to the regular courts, now he's been to the Jewish courts, and no one can help him. But just before he left, the rabbi told the Gentile, "Nevertheless, I'm confident that the innkeeper will be generous. Because you spent so much money with him, I believe he'd be willing to donate 5 gold coins to you as a gesture of goodwill." And the innkeeper said, "Yes, of course, Rabbi. If the rabbi tells me to do it, I'll do it immediately." And so the two men prepared to leave, and the rabbi signaled to the innkeeper to remain behind. Once they were alone, the rabbi whispered, "Be careful. Don't give him 5 coins from his own pouch, or he'll recognize them and accuse you before the police." And the innkeeper said, "Rabbi, do you think I'm such a fool? Of course I'll use other money. I won't use his." And then the rabbi said, "So you did take his money. Now give it back to him, and there better not be a single coin missing." The innkeeper who had been caught returned the money to the Gentile, who couldn't stop praising the rabbi and the Jewish people. And the story spread throughout the police station and the courts, and was a great Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of God's name. And that was the genius and wisdom of Rabbi Chaim Tzvi. However, he wasn't just brilliant, he was also humble. After he got married, and after his time in studying in the Pressburg Yeshiva, many offers to be a rabbi poured in from all kinds of Jewish communities. The Rabbi Chaim Tzvi refused to take on any of them. For a time, he relied on his wealthy father-in-law to support him, but when his father-in-law couldn't, he went into business, into trade, buying and selling wholesale. And even though he had to travel a lot, he never abandoned his Torah study. Many times, even when he was traveling on a wagon, he would be learning Torah. And sometimes he would visit Pressburg and see his teacher, the Chassam Sofer, and present to him Torah insights that he had written on his business trips. And during these visits, of course, there were very deep discussions between the teacher and the student. On one business trip, it coincided with a visit to the Chassam Sofer. And even though he had come to Pressburg to go to a business fair to buy goods, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi really wanted to speak with his teacher first. And they got into a long discussion that gave the Chassam Sofer so much joy that he said, my son, Chaim Tzvi, I think it's time for you to put on the garments of the Kohen Gadol and be a rabbi and serve the Jewish community. And hearing these words, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi turned white, and then he blushed, and he said, Rabbi, I would never think of being a rabbi of a community. Who am I? And what am I? I'm insignificant, I'm nothing. That I would dare to put on the garment of the Kohen Gadol and be a rabbi and stand in the place of great men? Chas v'shalom. God forbid I should do such a thing. But the Chassam Sofer said, Rabbi, people need you. They need you as a teacher and a leader. They need your wisdom and your inspiration. And Reb Chaim Tzvi said, Baruch Hashem, I have a livelihood that provides me with honor and provides for my family. I don't want to take a rabbinical position. I'm sure there are many other great students that could use it. I already have a means of making a living. And somebody without my means and my skills is probably much more worthy of being a rabbi than me. The Chassam Sofer was not convinced. He said, Chaim Tzvi, if you don't willingly take the yoke of the rabbinate, you may be forced by heaven to take it upon yourself against your will. But for Rabbi Chaim Tzvi, he was so far removed from thinking of being a rabbi that even a statement like that by the Chassam Sofer didn't move him. And he left the rabbi and set out for the marketplace to do the business that he had come there for. Now, my friends, listen to this because this shows the hashgacha pratit, the divine providence that we all have in life. He was traveling on a lonely road in a dense forest, and a gang of armed robbers came out of the woods, encircled his wagon and surrounded it. And they were screaming with knives in the air, demanding money, and there was no escape. This gang of highwaymen were terrorizing travelers for a long time, and despite the police efforts, they could never seem to find them, and they'd only become more bold and cruel over time. So Rabbi Chaim Tzvi, in addition to being very clever and wise, happened to also be a physically strong person. And even in the face of danger, he remained calm. He started reasoning with the thieves, explaining that the oxen that he had bought had been sent out on a different route while he traveled alone to sell them. And he said to the thieves, if you attack me now, when I don't have any money, it'll be a waste of your time. Why don't you wait until I come back from the market when my pockets are full, and then I'll be happy to share with you. Now, his goal was simply to escape from the thieves. And for some reason, they trusted the rabbi. And they said, sure, Rabbi, we'll wait here for you. And when you come back, you'll pay us the money. And the thieves went on their way, and the rabbi continued. And he conducted his business and made a nice profit. And on his way home, he'd almost completely forgotten about it. And he decided just in case, he better take a different route back home, so he didn't cross paths with the robbers. And Baruch Hashem, he made it home safely. And immediately when he got home, as was his custom, he would start learning Torah, and he would get so involved in learning Torah, he would completely forget about the world around him, and there was no fatigue from all of his travels. Midnight came and went, and the rabbi continued learning and learning and learning. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on the door. A group of robbers burst into the house. And they said to the rabbi, you failed to keep your promise to return after the market and share your profits with us. And so we've come to take our money. Had you come as you promised, we would have just taken a small percentage of your profits. But now because you deceived us, we want everything. We want every coin. We want everything in this house. We want everything you've ever hidden in this house. And Rabbi Chaim Tzvi, as I said, was a strong man, but the robbers had reinforcements waiting outside. And very quickly, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi found himself tied up to a chair. And the robbers took every single thing they could find, leaving nothing behind, and then disappeared just as quickly as they had come, leaving the house stripped bare and the family scared, bruised and battered. And at that moment, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi promised to Hashem that he would accept the first offer of a rabbinate that came his way without any hesitation. And a few days later, as the local police chief and his team were going over the ransacked home, looking for any evidence, a postman arrived with a letter for the rabbi, and seeing the stamp was from Pressburg, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi, overcome with emotion, excitedly opened the letter. The letter was short and direct, and it said, did I not beg you to accept the yoke of the rabbinate willingly? You didn't listen to me, and now it's clear that a heavenly decree has been issued against you. and you have no choice but to take the mantle of leadership and serve as a shepherd to the Jewish people. And of course, the letter was from the Chassam Sofer. And just a few hours later, a delegation from a large community showed up at Rabbi Chaim Tzvi's door with a formal request that he be the rabbi of the community, and without any hesitation, he accepted it on the spot. From there, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi eventually became the rabbi of the community of Verbo, where he had studied in his youth, and ultimately he became the rabbi of the prestigious Jewish community of Ungvar. And under his leadership, the Jewish community became a center of Torah learning and Yiras Shamayim, awe of heaven. And Rabbi Chaim Tzvi established yeshivot and ruled on complex matters of Jewish law, became known throughout Hungary and beyond for his profound wisdom, compassion, and humility. In his life's journey, from the child who challenged his teacher's sermon to the reluctant sage who accepted the rabbinic leadership only after heaven had proven to him that he had no choice, was the true balance of brilliance and humility, courage and compassion that defines true Jewish leadership. The legacy of Rabbi Chaim Tzvi Manheimer continues to inspire generations through his written works and through stories like this, reminding us that even the greatest talents have to be guided by humility, and sometimes we need a little help from heaven, because when we think that we're resisting our calling, it might be the very path through which our divine purpose is fulfilled. And so, my friends, we might not be on the level to receive letters from the Chassam Sofer and direct messages from heaven, but when you know that there's something good and positive that you should be doing, find a way to do it so that you can also live your divine purpose. Hi, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. I have another story for you, and this just shows us how Hashem is running the world and watches over his children even when everything seems lost. Now, this story was told by Rabbi Tuvia Bolton, who heard it from the man that it happened to. The man is referred to as Mr. Smith in the story, and he had come to the Or Tamimim Yeshiva in Kfar Chabad here in Israel to study. And of course, he was well above the maximum age of the students in the yeshiva. And he told this story that in the year 2000, 3 of his children, 2 boys and 1 girl, got engaged to be married. And not only did he not have enough money for the weddings, he didn't even have enough money to fly to the weddings. And of course, if you're listening to this podcast for a while, you know that I had 2 children, Baruch Hashem, 2 daughters, that got married back to back within 6 weeks of one another. And I had the same thing. I only had 4,000 shekels to pay the first shadchanit. And the weddings cost about 80,000 shekels each. And just like a miracle, the heavens opened up and the money came. And as soon as the weddings were over, that was it. So, Mr. Smith, things were looking bad for him. He had a restaurant, but it wasn't doing well. He already owed money, mortgaged his home. So there was no way for him to get a loan. And he didn't know what he was going to do. How was he going to pay for the weddings? But his wife wasn't worried. She kept telling her husband, Herschel, don't just stand there, complain, and do nothing. Daven, ask Hashem to help. And sometimes the simplest advice is the deepest. So he davened and he said psalms to Hullman whenever he had a free moment. But the deadline was getting closer and his debts were not going down. And finally, in desperation, his wife suggested that instead of just wandering around the house worrying, that he should do something positive like clean up his home office. Now, that was no simple job because he was too busy trying to figure out how to pay off his debts and he didn't want to clean up the room. But to make his wife happy, he agreed. He started in one corner, threw away a lot of useless paper, tons of dust, and after working for many hours, he was about to give up. And then he noticed there was a neat bundle of official-looking papers. He looked closer and he saw it was 100 shares of Northern Natural Gas stock that was bought at $7 a share that he had purchased 24 years earlier in 1976. He didn't even remember buying them, and he wondered if they were worth anything. So he went into his computer, and he types in the name, and he sees that no such company exists. He tried all kinds of combinations, but 24 years is a long time. But he didn't throw them away. He had nothing to lose, so the next day he took them to his restaurant, and at lunch break, he took them to the stock brokerage down the street and asked them if they were worth anything. So the broker said, "Let me check." And he starts searching in a way only a stockbroker can, but also he found nothing. So Mr. Smith, he left the stocks at the brokerage, and he said, "Please do a more thorough search when you have some free time, and if they're worth something, I'll give you a percentage of them." 2 days later, after Mr. Smith had completely forgotten about the entire affair and was back to worrying full-time about the weddings, he gets a phone call from the broker. He says, "Mr. Smith, I have some good news for you. 20 years ago, Northern Natural Gas was bought out by another company, who 2 years after that merged with another company. And then a third company merged with someone else. And a few years later, it was bought out by a company called Enron Gas, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. So to get to the point, you now own 600 shares of Enron at $80 a share." And all Mr. Smith managed to say was 4 words. "It's a miracle. Sell!" And the next day, he had $48,000 in his bank account. That was more than enough to pay for the 3 weddings and fly his family there. And his wife, although she was very happy and grateful to Hashem, wasn't surprised at all. She said, "All I told you was to daven and clean up your room. And the same Hashem who put our children together for the weddings also gave us the money to pay for them." But of course, you know, my friends, that story isn't over, because a month later, Mr. Smith just happened to open the financial page of his daily morning paper. And he reads there, "Enron management indicted for fraud. The stocks were worth 3 cents a share." Enron, one of the largest companies once in America, collapsed because in what became one of the biggest corporate scandals in history, their executives had created fake accounting to hide billions of dollars in debt, inflate their profits, and deceive investors and employees. And thousands of people lost their life savings, retirement funds, and the company that was once celebrated on Wall Street as innovative and visionary had been exposed to have built a house of cards, built on lies and corruption. And Mr. Smith read and reread the article to see if it was really the same company and the same stock. And it was, and there was no doubt about it. It was a double miracle, because if he had discovered those stocks later and not needed the money, he simply would have lost it all. But it really hit home when 3 months later he got a call from the Federal Securities and Exchange Commission. Of course, everyone knows it's a crime to have insider information on the stock exchange. And if he knew that Enron was going to crash and sold his stocks before, that's actually illegal. And it was obvious that that's what he did. If he didn't have some insider tip, how could he know to sell his shares at the highest price just a few days before it turned into nothing? They told him that if he didn't give an explanation, they would subpoena him to court. So he told them the whole thing about the weddings and the stocks he found, and showed them copies of the transaction and the original stocks, along with the invitations for the 3 weddings. And a week later, an investigator called Mr. Smith and admitted if he hadn't seen all the evidence with his own eyes, he would never have believed it. He told them the good Lord really kept an eye out for you, didn't he? And this teaches us, my friends, something so deep. When we think everything is falling apart, Hashem is always preparing miracles for us that we can't even imagine. And sometimes the solution to our biggest problems is waiting for us in the most unexpected places, maybe even in the dirty corner that we didn't want to clean up. May we all merit Bezat Hashem to see Hashem's hand guiding us even through our greatest challenges, and always remember that even when things seem the darkest, Hashem's light is preparing to shine. So I always regret adding this last story when it's Wednesday evening and I'm trying to get the podcast out. But when it's early in the week and I'm recording, who cares about Wednesday evening? It's time for another story. A short one, about the Babas Sali, who was feeling weak for some time, and even though he told his family he was fine, they insisted he go to the hospital and get checked. And so, because they were so worried, the Babas Sali said, "Fine, we'll go to the hospital." And at the hospital, they did all the tests and everything was fine, and the family asked to speak with the head of the department before allowing the Babas Sali to go back home. And the head of the department arrived, and he sees the Babas Sali, who always drank tea with 6 teaspoons of sugar. He says to the doctor, "Would you like the last sip of my tea?" Now the doctor understood who the Babas Sali was, and to have the last sip of tea from the Babas Sali's cup was a great honor, and it could bring all kinds of miracles. And when the head of the department tasted the sweetness of the tea, he says to the Babas Sali, "You probably have diabetes. We didn't check your blood sugar. We already have your blood, so let's do a check on the blood sugar." And the Babas Sali said to him, "I don't have diabetes, but you do, doctor." And the doctor said, "That's impossible. I did a blood test this morning, and my blood sugar was fine." And the Babas Sali repeated, "I don't have diabetes, but you do." So the doctor said to the Babas Sali, "If you agree to do a blood test, I'll do a blood test at the same time, and we'll see who has diabetes and who doesn't." And when they got the results, it showed exactly what the Babas Sali had said. The doctor had diabetes, and the Babas Sali was fine. And the doctor didn't believe the results, so he asked that he be tested another time, and the results came back exactly the same. So the Babas Sali says to the doctor, "Do you want to be healthy?" And the doctor says, "Yes, of course, very much so." So then the Babas Sali requested from his assistant to make him another cup of tea with 6 teaspoons of sugar. He took 1 sip of it, and then he told the doctor, "Now you drink the rest." And the doctor said, "What? I can't drink that. I have diabetes. It's like poison for me. It's dangerous for me to drink that." And the Babas Sali said, "Drink it and be healthy." And the doctor looked at him, and the Babas Sali said, "Drink it and be healthy." So the doctor drank down the full cup of sweet tea. And then the Babas Sali said to him, "Now do the test again, and you'll see that you're completely healthy." And they did the test again, and now his blood sugar was fine. And the doctor said, "How can this be? I just drank so much sugar, and instead of my blood sugar going up, it's gone down." And the Babas Sali said, "Know that when Hashem wants to heal you, even the sugar that caused the diabetes can now be used to heal. Remember, it is Hashem who is the healer, and you have to ask Him to make all of your treatments successful. And never forget that Hashem, who created nature, can change nature at will and do what you could never have expected." And so, of course, the message was clear to the doctor. He understood that he was given the ability to heal, not through his medical education, but by Hashem, and that only made him an even better doctor. May we all remember this story, my friends, for whatever we need. We can look at the physical world and we think that's reality and that's all there is. But we had miracle workers like the Babas Sali to teach us a lesson like this, that even though we think that one thing causes another, it's really Hashem that is the cause of all causes. And may we merit to always have that in the forefront of our minds whenever we're going through the crazy journey in this crazy world. Be'ezrat Hashem. Thank you so much for listening, my sweetest friends. Thank you to the Grant family for sponsoring this episode in memory of Ruth Bat Hillel. And thank you to all the supporters, all the new supporters, all the old supporters, all the listeners, all the people who get anything from this podcast. Thank you, my friends. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening and for sharing. And I look forward to sharing more stories with you next week, Be'ezrat Hashem. Until then, take care of yourselves, my friends. Good luck with the Pesach cleaning, and sei gesund.